On Thanksgiving morning, James stood in the doorway of his own dining room, watching strangers fill his house like it belonged to them. The long table was set with fine china, his late wife Helen's collection, but nobody had asked for his permission. His daughter, Lily, sat at the head of the table, laughing loudly at something her husband Max said. Max's mother, Brenda, watched the room with the cold confidence of a queen ruling stolen land. None of them noticed James standing there. They were too busy performing a perfect family scene without him. "Brenda, this turkey is amazing," Max said proudly as he carved another slice. Brenda smiled in a way that never reached her eyes. "Well, someone had to take charge. You know how men are in the kitchen, helpless." She glanced at James just long enough to make sure he heard it. James pulled out the only empty chair, stuck by the kitchen door, definitely not his usual seat. The head of the table, the place he'd held for 30 years, was now blocked by a tall floral centerpiece. Lily poured wine for everyone except him, moving with polished confidence. Not once did she look his way. James cut his turkey slowly, watching faces more than food, old sheriff habits guiding him. Lily tasted the stuffing and smiled brightly. "Mom, this is perfect. Where'd you get the recipe?" Mom. She'd been calling Brenda that for 6 months. Brenda reached across James without asking, sliding his water glass aside to make more room for her wine. "Oh, just something I threw together," she said sweetly. "Your father never appreciated good cooking anyway." She spoke about him like he wasn't even there. The conversation moved around James like he was a ghost. They talked about Black Friday sales, new restaurants, silly traffic complaints, perfectly normal things that somehow never included him. Then Brenda's tone shifted. "I was thinking about Helen the other day. Such a lovely woman." James froze. Brenda barely knew Helen. "She once told me she felt constrained," Brenda continued, letting the word float like poison. Lily leaned forward eagerly. "Really? Dad never said that." James set down his fork slowly. "Because it isn't true." Brenda smiled softly, the kind of smile meant to slice. "Oh, she confided in me." She felt trapped, wondering what her life could have been. Max nodded as if he understood something deep. "That must have been tough on a marriage." James looked at Lily, waiting for her to defend her mother. She didn't. Instead, she said quietly, "Dad, you were strict growing up." Strict, the word children used for structure and sacrifice. Brenda leaned back confidently. "Honestly, James, you were a pathetic husband then, and nothing's changed." The room fell silent. Even Max stopped chewing. Lily stared at James, waiting, almost hoping for him to explode. But James didn't raise his voice. He simply picked up his napkin, dabbed his mouth, and set it neatly beside his plate. Then he looked straight at Brenda. "At least I was honest with my wife until the very end," he said quietly. "Not everyone can say the same about their marriage." Brenda's face drained of color so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch. She knew exactly what he meant. Lily shot to her feet. "How dare you talk to her like that?" she shouted. Max joined in. "You owe my mother an apology right now." James didn't move. He simply returned his fork to his plate and cut another quiet slice of turkey. That small calm act enraged Lily more than shouting ever could. "Did you hear me?" she screamed. "Apologize to her." James looked at her with no emotion at all, and something in Lily's confidence began to crack. "Dad, this is unacceptable," Lily shouted, shaking with anger. "After everything we've done for you." Everything they'd done. What a joke. Living rent-free for 2 years. Using his credit cards. Driving his cars. Taking over his home piece by piece until he barely recognized it. James didn't respond. He simply looked at each of them calmly, and they hated him for that calm. Lily slammed her hand on the table. "Answer me. Apologize to my mother or there will be consequences." James stood up slowly, the scrape of his chair loud against the wood floor. Lily relaxed, thinking she'd won. "Good," she said sharply. "Now apologize and we can move past this." Max smirked. "About time you came to your senses, old man." But James didn't walk toward them. He walked around the table, straight toward Brenda. Brenda stiffened in her seat as James stopped behind her. He placed one steady hand on the back of her chair. Not threatening, just firm. She tried to lean away but had nowhere to go. Everyone watched him, breath held, waiting. James bent down until his mouth was near her ear. The room went dead silent. Then he whispered 2 soft words, just 2. "I know." Brenda's body trembled. Her face turned gray. Her hands shook so violently she had to grip the table. James straightened up and walked away without looking at anyone. He headed toward the front door with slow, steady steps. Lily ran after him, her voice cracking. "Mom, what did he say? What did he mean?" Brenda couldn't speak. She simply whispered, "Nothing, it's nothing." Max stared at her pale face. "Brenda, you look sick. Sit down." But James didn't wait for any of them. He grabbed his keys from the hallway table, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold November air. "Don't walk away from me," Lily shouted, rushing to the doorway. "Come back right now." James didn't turn around. He pulled the door closed behind him with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Lily kept yelling, but her words faded behind the wood. James walked to his truck with the calm focus of a man who had finally reached the edge of his patience. He drove off without looking back, leaving his own house behind him. 20 minutes later, James parked beneath a small apartment building downtown. The place was quiet, simple, and his alone, a space he had rented secretly months after Helen's death. Inside, he turned on a single desk lamp. Then he opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder he had hidden for weeks. The label on it read, "Brenda Clark, Investigation Report." He spread everything across the desk like puzzle pieces only he knew how to arrange. He had been waiting for the right moment. The folder held photographs, receipts, documents, and a long report from a private investigator he trusted. It revealed the truth. Brenda's husband, who supposedly died in a boat accident, was alive and living under a new name in New Mexico. The insurance payout, $180,000, had gone to Brenda 6 months after the death. Insurance fraud. Felony level. James organized each paper in order, his breathing slow and steady. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. He typed notes into his laptop, dates, locations, names, and legal statutes. Each detail made the picture clearer. Brenda hadn't just insulted Helen's memory at the table. She had built her life on lies. She had moved into James's home, manipulated Lily, and taken advantage of everything he owned. James leaned back in his chair. He knew what would come next. Not anger. Not shouting. A plan. For 2 days, James said nothing to anyone. Lily left frantic voicemails, some angry, some apologetic, some confused, but he didn't answer a single one. On the third morning, James took the entire file to his lawyer, Mr. Daniels, a steady man with sharp eyes. "Do you want eviction or full legal action?" Daniels asked. "Eviction first," James said calmly. "Clean and lawful." Daniels nodded. "They have no rights to stay. We'll handle it." That afternoon, James met with Anna Harper, a private investigator who had once worked alongside him during his days as sheriff. She slid into the booth at a diner, opened the folder, and scanned the photos with raised eyebrows. "She really thought she'd get away with this," Anna murmured. "She almost did," James replied. Anna closed the folder. "You want everything verified for court?" "Everything," James said. "No loose ends." By the week before Christmas, Anna returned with even more evidence. Pictures of Brenda's dead husband at work, walking his dog, and collecting mail. Witness statements. Employment records. A paper trail that stretched 15 years. James reviewed the documents at his apartment desk without blinking. The truth was now ironclad. Enough for eviction. Enough for civil charges. Enough to end Brenda's influence permanently. On December 26th, James returned to his house with his lawyer. Lily's face lit with hope when she saw him, but it died instantly when she noticed the papers in his hand. "These are legal notices," James said. "You have 30 days to leave my home." Lily shook her head in disbelief. "Dad, you can't be serious." "I am," he replied. Max stepped forward. "You can't evict us." But James didn't argue. He simply placed the notices in their hands, one for each of them. Brenda took her envelope last. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You've been living in my house without paying a single cent," James replied. "Your time is up." Lily grabbed his arm, crying. "We're your family." James looked at her calmly. "You stopped being my family when you told me to leave my own house." Max tried to puff his chest. "We'll fight this." James stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Try." James walked out of the house with Daniels beside him. Inside, Lily cried loudly while Max cursed under his breath. Brenda sat frozen, staring at the eviction notice like it was a death sentence. Outside, Daniels closed his briefcase. "They have no legal ground," he said. James nodded once. "They'll try to fight," Daniels added. James looked back at the house. "Let them. I'm done being their victim." 3 days later, James returned to the courthouse with Daniels to finalize the eviction filing. The clerk stamped the documents with quick, efficient movements. "Hearing in 4 weeks," she said. James thanked her and walked out. His phone buzzed again, another call from Lily. He ignored it. For years he had carried them. Now the weight was finally leaving his shoulders. That evening, James sat in his apartment reading the evidence again. Photos of Brenda's husband alive. Records of the insurance payout. Witness statements. Everything was clear and undeniable. His phone rang once more, Max this time. James answered and kept the phone on speaker. Max shouted threats, insults, wild promises of revenge. James listened silently. When Max finished, James said one sentence, "This call is recorded." The line went dead instantly. A week later, Daniels called James. "They filed a response," he said. "A weak one." James asked, "On what basis?" "Emotional hardship," Daniels replied. "They're claiming you acted out of anger." James almost smiled. "You have hours of evidence." "Yes," Daniels said. "Including the Thanksgiving recording you sent." James nodded. "This will be straightforward." When the hearing day arrived, the courtroom was tense. James sat beside Daniels, calm and composed. Across the aisle, Lily clung to Max's arm, her face red from crying. Brenda sat behind them, unable to meet James's eyes. Judge Harper entered, sharp-eyed and focused. Daniels stood first. "Your Honor, the facts are clear," he said. "Mr. James owns the property. The defendants lived rent-free and contributed nothing." Then he dropped the thick file of evidence onto the table with a heavy thump. Judge Harper reviewed the documents, flipping through pages of bank statements, property deeds, and recorded conversations. Finally, she looked at Lily. "Did you give your father an ultimatum on Thanksgiving?" Lily wiped her eyes. "I was emotional. Things were tense. Answer the question." "Yes," Lily whispered. The judge turned to Max. "Do you have proof of any financial contribution?" Max swallowed hard. "No, ma'am." The judge nodded slowly. Then Daniels played the video from Thanksgiving. The entire courtroom watched Brenda insult Helen's memory. They saw Lily scream that James must apologize or get out. They saw Max smirk as he supported the attack. Not a single voice defended James in the recording. Judge Harper's face grew harder with every minute. By the end, she looked at the defendants like strangers she no longer trusted. The judge took a deep breath. "I have heard enough," she said. "My ruling is simple." Lily sobbed quietly. Max stared at the floor. Brenda closed her eyes, bracing herself. Judge Harper continued, "The defendants must vacate the property by March 1st. Failure to comply will result in forced removal by the sheriff's department." A final bang of the gavel ended the case. James stood calmly. It was over. Outside the courthouse, Lily rushed after him. "Dad, please," she begged. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." James stopped but didn't turn around. "You meant every word," he said. Lily cried harder. "We're family." James shook his head. "Family doesn't treat me the way you did." He walked toward his truck while Lily collapsed into tears behind him. For the next few weeks, James prepared his house for a new beginning. He visited a hardware store, bought fresh paint, checked the locks, and made a list of repairs. He felt lighter each day. On March 1st, a sheriff's deputy stood beside him as Max, Lily, and Brenda loaded their things into a moving truck. None of them spoke to James. None of them dared meet his eyes. And for the first time in years, James felt peace rising inside him. Once the moving truck pulled away, the sheriff nodded to James. "Property's clear. It's yours again." James thanked him and stepped inside the house. Silence greeted him, real silence, not the heavy, smothered kind he'd felt for months. He walked from room to room, touching the walls, inspecting the floors, remembering what the house used to feel like before it was taken over. It needed work. But it was his again. Completely his. On the dining table, James placed a single large envelope. Inside were copies of everything: Brenda's insurance fraud documents, photos of her husband alive, financial records, and witness statements. This was the last loose end. He sealed the envelope, wrote the address of the insurance company's fraud unit, and carried it to the mailbox down the street. The metal clang of the mailbox closing felt final, like the end of a long fight. Justice would take care of the rest. Over the next month, Metropolitan Life Insurance launched their investigation. James received a notification. They were suing Brenda for the full $180,000 plus interest and penalties. He read the letter calmly, then set it aside. Brenda's life was collapsing piece by piece. Not because James attacked her, but because her lies finally caught up with her. That was always how truth worked. By April, James learned through his lawyer that Brenda had filed for bankruptcy. She had lost her savings, her reputation, and every ounce of control she once had. Max was struggling to find work, and Lily had moved into a small apartment miles away. James didn't feel joy. He didn't feel sorrow either. He felt distance, like the storm that once surrounded him was now far beyond the horizon. He'd survived it. One afternoon in May, James received a letter from Lily. She apologized again and explained that she and Max were barely surviving. She wrote pages about stress, regret, fear, and exhaustion. But the letter never said the words James knew mattered most. I was wrong. It only said, please understand. James folded the letter and placed it in a drawer without replying. He refused to step back into the same cycle he had escaped. Helping them financially would only restart the old pattern. They take and he gives. This chapter needed to stay closed. Yet life surprised him one day when a lawyer contacted him. Lily and Max had a 6-year-old son named Jacob, living with a relative during the chaos. The boy needed therapy, and no one could afford it. James sat with that information for a long time. A child was innocent. A child did not lie at a Thanksgiving table or insult Helen's memory. A child did not manipulate or threaten or use anyone. So James called his lawyer. Arrange payment, he said. Anonymous. Directly to the therapist. It was the first act of mercy he had allowed himself. Summer arrived warm and bright. James sold his old house, the one filled with heavy memories, and bought a quiet ranch far outside the city. 12 acres, a barn, open fields, and the kind of peace you could feel in your bones. He moved in slowly, fixing fences and painting the porch by hand. He bought 2 horses simply because he wanted them. Each day felt like a step toward rebuilding himself. In the evenings, James sat on his wooden porch, watching the horses graze as the sun dipped behind the trees. He thought about Helen sometimes, her laughter, her kindness, her calm voice. He never thought about Brenda. Never about Max. And only sometimes about Lily, with a quiet ache that no longer controlled him. He had chosen peace, and for the first time, peace stayed. One golden evening, James leaned back in his rocking chair as a warm breeze moved across the fields. The past year had broken him, strengthened him, rebuilt him, and freed him. Justice had been served, firmly, clearly, and without cruelty. Mercy had been given where it was deserved. And now, life was his again. He watched the sunset stretch across the sky and whispered, "This is home."